Welcome to the Tough Decisions Network for Entrepreneurs. I'm Dan Hanford, and my wife, Danae, and I interview successful people sharing stories behind tough decisions that they've had to make along their journey as an entrepreneur. Before we get started, let's hear from one of our sponsors. Have you ever thought about investing in real estate, but find yourself so busy that you don't have time for it? Do you have FOMO, which is the fear of missing out? At HanfordCapital.com, we help investors with passive real estate investments that project better returns than traditional investment vehicles such as the stock market. If you'd like to find out more about our passive real estate investments, visit HanfordCapital.com. That's HANDFORD Capital.com. We will jump on a call with you to discuss your investment goals and to see if our investments are a good fit for you. This advertisement is not to be construed as an offer or recommendation to buy or sell a security. Visit HanfordCapital.com.
On the podcast with us today is Chris Michael Harris. He's a prominent serial entrepreneur, podcast host, and motivational speaker. He's currently involved in several different industries, also the host of Entrepreneur Hour. So Chris, thank you very much for being with us today. We're looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited.
Well, Chris, I want you to walk us through, where you've been and what your current focus is right now as an entrepreneur.
Oh, man. So I'm always asked this question and I always answer it a little bit differently. But basically, I was an entrepreneur before I knew what that word was. So I was the guy at 11 or 12 years old that was mowing everybody's lawn on my entire street while my friends were figuring out what to do in fifth grade, whether they're going to the pool or doing whatever and having fun with friends. I was figuring out, how can I make money? And so I think at one point I was like the wealthiest of my friends in like middle school because I had worked. Like to me, the hour for pay model just never made sense, even at that young age. So I don't think even back then, and it seems like only recently has the entrepreneur term become such a buzzword where it's now mainstream and it's like the pseudo like cool thing to do. But back then I had no idea what that word even was. So I grew up in a business household and stuff like that. And then when I got to college, trying to figure out what the heck I was going to do with my life, it was as far ranging as from astronaut to neurosurgeon. I mean, I had no clue as far as what I wanted to do. And so I was introduced to a mentor of mine who kind of reintroduced the notion of, getting away from the hour for pay model. So around that same time, and I've got some incredible stories with him mentor-wise of stuff that we did that was just bizarre for, somebody in the early 20s. I don't know if I'll have time to get to that. But anyways, around the same time, I was a senior in college. And my brother and I decided to start our own business. It was a relocation business. We were moving college students throughout the transitional summer months between, the spring and fall semesters. And lo and behold, man, within like a month and a half, 2 months, we had generated like $13,000 in revenue, just moving people in one building. And so I graduate, go on, got a quote unquote real job at that point. Still hadn't committed full time to entrepreneurship. My brother stuck with it and they doubled that. They did something like $25,000 in revenue in just about 2.5 months that next summer. And I said, we're on to something. And around the same time, my boss at that time said, you're not going to get respect in our industry until your hair looks like mine. Well, his hair was white as snow. And I just had no interest in that. I just said, I don't, maybe I'm just, too millennial to accept that or something. I don't know. But again, kind of going back to that, not getting that hour for pay model and like, why not? Like if I can create something of value now, why would I have to wait till I'm 50 to then maximize my earning potential? So I went for it. And from that point forward, we then scaled. We became an official business, licensed, incorporated, et cetera. It wasn't just a side thing. We actually, from year 1 to year 2, grew over 1,000% in terms of revenue. And from year 2 to year 3, we doubled that to 1.2 million. We were doing business in 32 states around the country. We had 300 part-time employees working with 5 of the 7 major furniture manufacturers in our industry. We were doing installation work for big MDUs, student housing facilities. We were doing like 11,000 pieces of furniture, $130,000 contracts, working around the clock with construction crew stuff. I mean, it was wild. So from that point forward, I kind of, was getting pulled into other ventures and endeavors. And around the same time, I launched the podcast, which within 2 weeks was trending top 5 worldwide under business health education on iTunes. We then were landing huge guests like Damon John. We've had 3 sharks from Shark Tank. We've had over like 30 or 40 New York Times bestselling authors. We've just got a lot of exposure and built a massive audience now. In a very, very short duration of time, we got to like 500,000 downloads within, the first, I think like 9 to 12 months or something like that. So we had some pretty accelerated growth with that. And then the recent thing, actually it has yet to been formally announced, but I believe I'm allowed to talk about it. I'm going to be running, I just moved to Austin, Texas, and I'm going to be running one of the major global accelerator programs for the Austin chapter here called Founder Institute. So that's going to give me a lot of exposure to some high net worth individuals, some PE and VC firms, and so on and so forth, plus helping tech startups, go off and raise funding and go sell their businesses for hundreds of millions of dollars and so on and so forth. So a lot going on, but that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
I was going to say, when I asked you to, give us what your current focus is, when I see that we have a serial entrepreneur on, a lot of times it's hard to say what is the one focus, because I'm the same way. I'm a serial entrepreneur and I have multiple things going on always at the same time. And so to say what's my one current focus, well, what I'm right now, it's this podcast because I'm on here with this interview. But then when I get out the podcast, it'll be something totally different. So, I really appreciate that introduction there of your background and your bio and what your current, focuses are. So can you share with us a tough decision that you've had to make along this journey as a serial entrepreneur and the lessons that you learned through that tough decision?
Yeah, man. So this was a recent thing, and this took me a long time, and largely I'm still kind of processing and getting over it and getting back on the saddle, so to speak. So with that said business, the one out of college, that was my baby. It's like I compare your first business to like your first true like puppy love. Like the first girl, or if you're a female listening, your first like boyfriend you fell in love with. It's really hard. Like, you should break up with that person because you're like, okay, this was like in middle school or high school. Like, it's not we're not going to get married, but it's like, it's hard because it's the first time that you felt that way about something, so it's different. Not to say that any breakups are any easier, but I think that first one, this always has that sentimental value to it. So anyways, with that first business, we were going crazy, man. I was working 18, 20 hours a day. I was doing red eyes. I was driving. In 1 week, I drove the distance from New York to LA and halfway back in about 7 to 10 days, just because that's what it required. That's what growth required. And so I knew I kind of got some indications, some red flags that had shown themselves in terms of my health. And I didn't realize it, but it was actually a chronic illness that had stemmed back to probably multiple decades, even into my early, 8, 9, 10-year-old age range. But I ignored it. And I kept just plowing through and just push ahead and being a type A driver. Like I just said, whatever. Happiness is a destination, and that was my mindset. And it was completely wrong. It was completely erroneous, obviously. But it was like happiness and all these things in my health. I'll take care of those things when I make it. And I think that was a huge mistake. So ultimately what happened is that May of 2016, it got so bad that I had no choice but to go like, hey, I've got to figure out what's going on. So it turned out the physician at that time said, all the lab results, so you've got one of the worst cases of intestinal dysbiosis that I've seen in 32 years of practice for someone your age. And essentially what that means is like your gut is basically, I don't want to get into like the big details of it, but essentially you've got such an imbalance in healthy gut bacteria versus bad gut bacteria that like it's shutting down. So like I literally the month of May, not to be gross, but like I couldn't go to the bathroom for like half the month. Like I just couldn't. Nothing was like the lights were on, nobody was home kind of thing. And that's, again, I don't want to be gross, but like something was clearly wrong, right? And so he said, look, I'm not going to try to scare you here, but you're the type that could realistically be looking at cancer by the time you're 35. And he just asked me point blank. He's just like, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs that come in here, similar situation, type A's, drivers, and so on and so forth. It's like, what are you willing to give up for your successes? And then not only that, but how much more successful you think you'll be if you're able to take some time, rectify this. And he said this verbatim. He said, when you're done, you get healthy. If you've done this with all of your ailments going on and this going on internally, you're going to be quote unquote freaking Steve Jobs when you get healthy. And that was all I needed to hear. So at that point forward, the business was, we were in the middle of a cap raise. We'd been valued at $7.2 million and we were raising 1.5 for 25%. We were literally getting close to closing that deal. God kind of showed the way that wasn't going to happen. And I think the health thing was also tied into that. And I said, I got to let it go. And so I did. And within a very short period of time after that, it was just like, we just had to close the business and liquidate our assets and move on. And so that was tough. If it wasn't the exit that I had in mind, and you read about the people in Forbes that go out and sell their companies for 30, 50, 100, $150 million or even more. And that's what I wanted my story to be. And truth be told, like, you just have to recognize that sometimes there's a bigger plan, a bigger purpose for your life. And sometimes you have to do what's necessary for you for the long haul. And so that was really tough, man. And so I can talk more about, how I've dealt with that over the past 2 years since that point in time, but a lot of recovering, a lot of focusing on my health and rebuilding the foundations for my future.
How many people were a part of that company at that time?
So at that point, it was a very seasonal business. So this was our summer months. I would say at that point we probably had over 150, 200 employees. Now they were part-time. Sure. So there was only like 2 or 3 other people that were full-time salary. And that was largely one of the hardest decisions for me to make was these people have to now go find jobs, and I felt largely responsible for that. They committed. It was my most triumphant, I think, in business was when those salaried people, when my dream, we had shared dreams, like inception status, like their future and their dream. I think people so undervalue this. When someone is willing to commit their one life to your vision There's no greater compliment than that. And so to tell them like, hey guys, I can't do this anymore. Like I have to close this business. I have to move on. That was really tough. That was really, really tough.
I can't imagine having those conversations. And I'm just kind of, having a visceral moment, kind of imagining you having those conversations with your team. Did you have any other partners in this business with you? Or were you at that time before you were going to be doing that capital raise, were you the sole owner?
No, I was sold. We had some folks that were vested in terms of, we were going to see, I'm not a fan of just coughing up equity as soon as somebody jumps in. I like to have people earn their equity, so to speak. I think it not only protects you, it protects them. And so we had some people that had the opportunity to earn equity given, their commitment going forward and what have you, and the time that they were involved with the organization. But at that point, my cap table was 100% clean. It was just me, 100%.
So who did you at that time have that you were bouncing some of these thoughts on? Because you obviously this is one of those tough decisions that you wouldn't just make really quickly. You'd be thinking about this and you're really saying, hey, is this really the right decision? Because not only does it affect your livelihood, but it also affects the livelihood of 150 people that are now at that time working with your organization in some form or fashion. And of course, not only is it just the 150 people, it's the families of those 150 people. So it could be 400, 500, 600 people by the time you start adding up all their spouses and kids and all this other things that you're actually with that business impacting.
Yeah. And so I think, and you're absolutely right on all fronts. So the two people that I talked to, my mentors, first of all, if you're listening to this podcast and you don't have mentors and you're trying to scale anything, you need to stop everything you're doing right now and go find mentors and advisors, like for real, because largely what I did, that was a mistake. I didn't go through accelerator programs. I didn't surround myself with the right mentors. Like I just figured stuff out, and that's a painful process. And that largely is probably one of the reasons why, if I had a mentor or a business coach or anything at that point, when we were initially growing, would have told me, hey man, you can't ignore this health thing. Like let's slow down your growth a little bit and let's focus on getting you healthy so that you can keep running and rocking and rolling. But at that time, I actually finally in year 3, when we were, hey, it's time to raise money. I need help. I hired a business coach, Bill Douglas, phenomenal. He's run several $100 million plus companies. He's actually running another one right now called OpticWise. It's causing major disruption in the fiber optic internet space. But Bill has had 2 near-death experiences. He's been through everything and more when it relates to business ups and downs. And he was my shepherd in a lot of ways. Like he really helped, not to be blasphemous by any stretch, but he really helped guide me throughout that process and was there and was my shoulder to cry on. I mean, I'm not afraid to admit that. Like there were moments where I was having nervous breakdowns about making that decision. And like, why was this happening to me? Like, why was God allowing me my business to just tank like it did? Like we came so far now to fall flat on our faces and have this thing, it was just really tough. So my wife also, she's an entrepreneur as well. She has her own business. So we were constantly back and forth every hour of every day. Like, what are we going to do? How are we going to support each other? And so on and so forth. So I would say those 2 people, I try to leave family out of it. I think that family, they are, I don't want to say tainted. That's probably not the right word to utilize, but it's going to be too emotional for them, right? They're not going to be able to give you objective feedback because they care about you as a person and that's an emotional thing for them and stuff like that. So really I tried to seek out people, advisors, mentors, Bill, my wife, that were close enough to the situation that was going on, but could also give me objective feedback and walk me through the process. And the big thing is this is a major takeaway I'll leave you with because I'm kind of being long-winded in my answer here. The majority of my mentors told me this, Chris, don't die on the hill with this business. All entrepreneurs go through this. This is like somewhat a rite of passage. Everyone experiences setbacks and failures. It's just a matter of how you move forward from those things, but don't go die on the hill with this business. And that was all I needed to hear to say, you know what, there will be other opportunities that are bigger, better, and more prosperous.
When you look back at that business, are there certain things that you look at and you say, I could have done things a little bit differently that would have allowed me, meaning you, to be able to continue with that business so that you weren't so, to the point of being able to die on the hill and having to, fix these health issues along the way?
Oh gosh, how long do I have to answer this question?
I know that was a deep question, but I just think that there's probably some things that you look back and you go, if I would have done this or this, then I probably could have kept that going, or I could have pivoted a little bit better or changed. So what are some of those things that you can kind of think of?
All right. So first and foremost, and I'm completely biased at this point, so you'll have to take this with maybe a grain of salt, but I do think there's a reason I'm involved with this program. So as mentioned, I'm going to be the local director here for Founder Institute in Austin. And there's a reason for that so I think we really need to be careful because there are subcomponents or subsets of entrepreneurship. So like, for example, what my wife does is she's online and she's largely, YouTube and selling online courses and membership sites. And then I talk to people that are building the next big app. And those conversations are inherently different. Then I go off and talk to small business owners, and it's like these people from different universe, they're from different planets. So first of all, recognizing who you are amongst those subsets, because entrepreneurship as a whole, I think, is a bit too vague. So it's hard to give generalized advice to just quote unquote entrepreneurs. So it depends on what you're trying to aim to accomplish with your business. But I think for me, to answer your question directly, I want growth. I want to build big companies. I want to hire 500,000, or 500 to 1,000 people or more. Like I want to change 1 million lives. So when you have big ambitions, you have to surround yourself with the right resources. And so I think going through and positioning myself to go through an accelerator program, not unlike a Founder Institute program, making sure that I'm going to have the path to success, helping people that are experienced in doing those things, helping people build companies, go off and have a successful exit, that have 30 plus years of experience, that are connected with the right resources in terms of, like last night, we had our chapter meeting. There was a guy there that runs a fund that's $100 million. That's a small VC fund. That is not a big fund, $100 million. But still, like even that connection to somebody like that, I didn't have any of that. And so what you're doing is you're taking a reactionary approach. And when you take a reactionary approach in business, what's going to happen is you get burned. And so what you really need to be doing is not only you're not going to have the resources to be able to know what to do next, but those people will help you make really conscientious and wise decisions as it relates to moving forward. Because the more you grow, the more valuable those decisions are, the more they're consequential. And so that's what ended up happening is I look back and there's a million things that I could have prevented if I just had the right people and resources around me that could have helped us not only pave the way to begin with and not have to go back and then recarve out a path, but then have to literally, in a lot of cases, go back and reestablish a foundation just so we can move back forward to where we were. So we created a lot more stress for ourselves and we actually had to, a lot more challenges than we had to in many, many cases.
So Chris, what is a book that you would recommend to our listeners that has affected the way you make decisions or the way you run your businesses now?
Yeah, so I'm a voracious reader. So that's a really tough question for me. I have one here. And if I had to just pick one, if you force me to pick one, I would say Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, I think is probably where I would start. I've heard a lot of people in terms of early stage will say something like Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which is a great place to start too. But I would say I would start with Think and Grow Rich. If I had to choose one, just one book is the one I would choose.
Well, let's shift here a little bit on the conversation to some of the things that you've done with the money that you've made up to this point in your life as an entrepreneur. Have you traveled to any exciting places or purchased any extravagant items with the money that you've made up to this point as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I'm more about experiences than items. I'm not very materialistic when it comes to that because I have a very unique view on liabilities versus assets and what have you. So, which you're in real estate, so I'm sure you can appreciate that statement.
Sure, absolutely.
So, I think the biggest thing, actually, my wife and I are now, which we should talk after, we're just now getting into acquiring real estate assets and stuff like that. So that would probably be a big one for us is like going out and looking for, $400,000, $500,000 houses as our first home purchase is awesome. But also investing in various properties. So that's really cool to be able to be like, holy wow, like we got approved for a lot more than we thought we would have, like pre-approved. So that's cool. But I think the biggest thing for me when you say that or you ask that question is every year, at the beginning of the year, we spend at least a month out of the country. So we'll go to Puerto Rico. We spent the entire month in Puerto Rico this year. In 2017, we went on 13 vacations. Like we find a conference somewhere and we like, hey, let's go spend the week. And we spent 5 days just gallivanting around. And then we went to the conference over the weekend or whatever the case may be. So just having the freedom to just say, let's go do that. Let's go do this. Let's go check this out or whatever. And then to be able to roll that into a business expense because you actually are doing something business related. I think that's kind of like the freedom that we all aspire to have, but to be able to really conceptualize and like experience that, I think is inherently different. Once you're
it's that mobile office, right?
It is. It's the mobile office. So I didn't have that for a long time with my first business. And so once I did, I was like, wow, I can do whatever and be wherever I want to be. And so that really was awesome, man. So I think it's not necessarily like one trip per se. It's just the freedom to be able to take any trip that we want to. And usually we do something on a monthly basis. We'll have either a staycation or we'll go someplace nearby, or maybe we just go somewhere for a month. So it's just the freedom to be able to go and do an experience and see things.
So the next question I have on here is, what is the next item on your bucket list or the next thing that's on your vision board for you right now?
Yeah. So this is one that's kind of near and dear to me, actually. So bucket list wise, I remember I was like 5 or 6 years old and I made like a pretty astounding comment to my mom, but I said that, whatever I did in life, I wanted to change the world. And so, and that sounds, for a 5, 6, 7-year-old, I don't know how old I was. Don't quote me. That's a pretty profound statement. And so bucket list wise, I think the only thing that really matters to me, honestly, I don't care about the money I make. I don't care about the things that I have, the cars that I drive, the house I live in, or whatever. I think the big thing for me on my bucket list is like, did I make, in whatever ways that I'm possible of doing so, did I make a difference in people's lives? And so when I look at somebody like a Brendan Burchard, who's a huge mentor of mine, or I look at a Tony Robbins and stuff like that, and I see just the profound impact they've had on the world and on people's lives, like that's what I aspire to do. And so I think bucket list wise, like I want to have that visibility, not for the sake of just vanity and, oh yeah, 1 million people know who I am or whatever, but just for the sake of like, that just gives you so much more of a platform to reach those people. So I think bucket list wise, I want to establish that kind of cloud and that kind of visibility.
Well, Chris, how can the listeners reach out to you and start to follow you a little bit more after they listen to this episode?
Yeah. So if you go to chrismichaelharris.com/podcast, you can actually check me out. The Entrepreneur Hour podcast is my show, or you can just go to chrismichaelharris.com and check that out. I do have right now, there's something we've been running if your audience wants to check it out. It's chrismichaelharris.com/ I believe it's Avatar. Yeah, it's Avatar. And basically what it is it's a quick workshop that we did 15 minutes. And it's just basically like how to establish what your ideal customer looks like. Because a lot of times we don't know who we're selling to. We're just selling stuff that we think is cool. We don't actually know who we're selling to and if they're actually going to find value in that. So it's a quick 15-minute workshop I did. It's 100% free. I'll go to chrismichaelharris.com/avatar.
And we will make sure in the show notes at the toughdecisions.net website that we'll put those links so that they are properly, sent to the correct, links on your website and various things like that too, Chris. So thank you so much for taking some time out of your schedule to be with us here today. I wish you the very best and look forward to having you on a future episode as you continue to grow as an entrepreneur.
Sweet, guys. Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks.
Bye. See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Tough Decisions Network. Be sure to visit toughdecisions.net to gain access to show notes for this episode and to join our free weekly entrepreneur email where we will send you news about the latest technology for your business, inspiring quotes, and the latest books for entrepreneurs. That's toughdecisions.net.